Welcome to the Practice Podcast, conversations probing the nature of practice. I'm your host, Dave Fearon. Wow. I've found someone, folks. I've found someone who, in my head, matches up to every aspect of the nature of practice that Peter Vale and I conjectured about in a book on practice as a way of being. There's a little bit of a book plug right away, but that's my point, that we know not one person can possibly represent all the characteristics that we've thought of about someone who loves what they do, which we call a practice. But I found one in this conversation. Kathleen Ralls, R-A-L-L-S, has just finished a book. You'll hear about it. And she's doing all kinds of incredible things with young women in athletics and on and on. Has her doctorate in motion, in the best sense of the word, all the time, and sees an endless future of doing what she loves to do. Research, write, teach, coach, speak. Kathleen Ralls. So take my word for it, or listen to this conversation and find out for yourselves. Well, you know how it is when you know someone who knows someone, and they say, you really should get to know someone. Well, someone is Kathleen Ralls, who is with me now. And the first someone was Tom Casey, with whom I've had several episodes, because he has a real keen eye on the future of leadership at the senior level. Turns out that his nephew is a close friend of Kathleen's. And that's how I learned from Tom, hey, you really should talk to Kathleen because she just finished her first book. And of course I wanted to, because that's the fun of doing this podcast the way I do. Practice is everywhere. Practitioners of every sort. And one of the cool things, your practice, what I've learned in the first 10 minutes we got acquainted here, is that you can combine several of your loves: sport, writing, educating, women in general sense, and specifically women who have learned to compete in sports, all together. And you sat down and slogged out the writing of a book, and which I have just finished too. And I congratulate you for that endurance contest that you've just won.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Dave. I mean, right back at you. I think we're both fresh off the book writing and editing fix. So, yeah.
What did you learn about yourself in writing that book?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, if I could take just one quick step back, one of the things that I do is I run every day. I have actually, last Friday, I just passed my 3-year running streak. I've run every single day for the last 3 years. And then from that streak, I've learned, I may not be great at a lot of things. I'm seeing, as I'm in my early 40s, I'm learning I'm more of a generalist. But that generalist, the key to success has been to be consistent. And that carried me to get through the book. Mm-hmm. And I realized that as I was writing the book, because I thought, I know that I'm going to get this project done. I knew that the project wouldn't stop. I wouldn't stop my research, my writing, my editing. So when things got kind of rough through the editing, through working with some of the women who maybe wanted to be portrayed a little differently, once they started reading through the drafts, I realized that I could still go through with it, that it was all a learning process. So sometimes when you write a book, you want to share a book because you have ideas and you might have some expertise in a field, but what you really learn is there are a whole lot more skills to learn in the process. So,
bingo. Absolutely bingo. It's just a piece, as we'd say up in Maine. Yes, you're putting letters down with a keyboard onto a screen, But even that for me, it's always been a challenge because I never use the same fingers the same time on the same key. So from the very simple tactile aspect of the practice of writing to the social aspect of, if you're going to write about human subjects, they're human and they may or may not appreciate what you're saying about them if you give them that opportunity, which you kindly have done. And then on to now the book is a piece of business in a way, because you'll never be, I'm sure, unless it's a bestseller like a Tom, another Tom, one Clancy. Of the Toms, right? Tom Clancy, exactly. We think of Tom Casey. You probably won't make the millions, but it is a business now in the sense that you want to recover some revenue through, however, royalties or whatever, as a bit of reward. But that's the thing about running every day and writing a book that may not make millions. You do it for a different reason than the average Joe who says, I like running and I like writing. Right. It's something you know about yourself, right, Kathleen, that makes you so durable.
Yeah, that's a good word. I like that. Well, I think I finished my dissertation just 2 years ago in 2020. And even getting through that was worse, I think.
Oh, yeah. Most people say I'll never touch a keyboard again after finishing a dissertation.
I took a good year off, but I journal often. And it's something that I find if I journal, in my thought process, I have the same ideas that keep coming back to me in the course of a day. But if I journal it, I can let it go. At least either totally or to a certain point, and that clears my mind to think about other things. So that was something that I did often in the writing, is I would kind of get up and journal in the morning. I'm a night writer, so I would try to write during the day, I'm going to be constructive in the daylight hours where everybody else is working. But it doesn't really work for me. So you might find me writing at 2 or 3 in the morning in my office.
Yike.
So yes, so that's kind of more my style. But certainly, part of the writing process, I was in a program called Creator Institute. So I had a cohort that we would meet occasionally online through Zoom. But I found, that I just kind of had to rely on myself a lot and knowing that I could do this. But it wasn't always like I didn't write the book to write a book. And I think some of the other cohort members, I always wanted to write a book, but for me, it was really about the ideas and the process and what I wanted to share, then the goal, the completion of it. So everyone, my friends and family are like, oh, congratulations, you wrote a book. I know an author. But for me, it's so much more about the process, and I'm still thinking about what that has meant to me.
So you really want that book to be read so that the ideas that were so important to you kind of infiltrate the ideas and the thinking of your readers. And I think that's what, from a teacher standpoint, which you are, is really our end state is not necessarily changing minds, but giving people a reason to change their own mind if they so choose. Sometimes we dangle a grade in front of that, but in many cases, you want to have the story well told for the learner to intrigue them and to put them into the picture as the reader, which is certainly what Peter and I have wanted to do and have done in our book. I want to then, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the title and the ideas that you are sharing in that book.
Yeah. So the title is, take her word for it, Sports Cultivates World-Class Leaders. And yes, so I interviewed 11 women from the US living in Europe and also in the Middle East. And all the women have some athletic background. There is one professional athlete. She is a current US Olympian. But the rest of the women are, some of them have been athletes their whole lives and continue to run races or coach or compete at some level. And others took up sport in their 30s and realized and saw a really direct connection between a a sudden trajectory in their career as they identified as athletes. And so I took their stories. I interviewed them last summer, and I was a sports journalist for the Lowell Sun. That was my first career before I went into teaching. And so I always really loved the interview process.
Yeah.
So I had a great time talking with these women and listening to their stories about sports, the lessons that they learned, and how they've applied them in their professional lives. And these women are nurses, they're lawyers, they're social workers, they're teachers, they're leadership executives. So there's a wide range of what they do. And the idea of the story is to make it readable. I didn't want it to be like, my dissertation is there's a lot of muddy research in there, a lot of journals and academia and citation,
a lot of endnotes. It's a habit.
Yes, it was all necessary. But I wanted to really share the stories. And more importantly, I wanted to share the voices of the women. So there's a lot of quotations, a lot of stories, because my research, one of the goals is I really focus on how they use their voices, because that's a personal interest of mine. It's something that I've struggled with, even as a teacher and a coach for 20 years. It's something that I'm very cognizant of how I present my voice and my ideas in groups. And so we talked a lot about that and how they see themselves in their professional worlds.
It seems to me that an athlete, women particularly, when they are performing whatever the sport, throwing a ball into a basket or using a lacrosse, what do they call that? Stick.
Yep.
Stick. All right, that's cool. But my point is that they are definitely speaking out loudly with their actions.
Yeah.
And they understand people are watching them, and they understand that they're in motion, and they understand that what they do has impact and consequences on others. So in many ways, when they're in quotes free to perform the sport, I would think that it gives them a wonderful feeling of self-expression. And yet here's the paradox. In a social situation where conventions and norms dictate what a woman does versus the men in the room, do you see that sometimes that there's like a dual personality going on there, or even in your case as a person who coaches and runs?
Absolutely. I mean, that's really where the research comes from. For my dissertation, I went to Ethiopia to work with girl runners to find out whether they feel their voices are empowered because of their participation in sport. So it's very personal to me. So with this book, it's interesting. Most of the women didn't really talk about that struggle or that dichotomy between being able to express themselves, competitively, but then what did that look like in terms of their voices professionally. Mm-hmm. I think the commonality that they all spoke of was wanting to experience success and however way they could get that. And I think that they were more focused on, I know how to be successful with my team competitively in sport. And I know that I can do the same, professionally, but there are different ways of doing that and different methods that are more conventional methods. You're working with a much more diverse group in your workplace than you are with your team.
Different muscles, if you will, social mental muscles. But it's cool, as I said, that winning, and I'm not trying to go all political on this, but that feeling of success because I won a race, we won the game, you found in Ethiopia. Mm-hmm. It's not just necessarily a Western thing. I wonder if there's something about us humans that you detected when you worked with those women about winning itself. What do you think it is?
Well, I haven't really focused a lot of my research on winning, to be honest.
You've been a coach all these years.
I know. Well,
kidding.
Yes.
I'm kidding. I guess... What about winning? Because when Peter and I had a general idea of how we wanted to think of practice, a way of thinking about practice, we said it's people who choose to pursue a stream of results over an indefinite period of time.
Okay.
during which circumstances change, the context of their practice changes, but it's results. It's
Right.
results that makes them want to work at a practice level of anything, writing, running, you name it. Results. And to me, that's pretty much tied into the score, the win, and the loss. So
Okay.
there we go. Now
That
we
makes
pinned
more
it down.
sense to me.
You got to rewrite the book now.
Yeah. I would say one of the points that many of the women spoke of was setting their own goals and defining their own success. And I think that is really empowering for many of them. In particular, one of the women I spoke with, she's a social worker in the Belfast prison system in Northern Ireland. And so she's one of the very few women who work in that field and in this particular setting in Belfast. And she also is a world-class mountaineer. She's done the Sibley Marathon, which is 156 miles across the Sahara Desert. And she's an open water swimmer. And she's also in her early 40s. Actually, she's a girl originally from Boston. And yes, so she's got a great story. And
that's a hell of a story.
She's even better if you know her in person. But she, one of the things she has learned is as her interests have changed, she's learned to kind of go with them and figure out. She defined herself as a real strong extrovert. She said, people look to me to use my voice, and I'd have to have a pretty poor self-perception of myself to not recognize that. But she has found that one of the best ways for her to win in your term and to find success is to take a step back and empower others so she can learn from them. She is just taking up this open water swimming competitive. She wants to do all the 8 major channels in the world. And you're dealing with, the tides, the hypothermia, whatever is floating around you, and just general endurance and racing against the clock and whatever else. She's a mother. She has 2 boys. She's
in her 40s.
She is, and she's just taking this up. And so, she said, because of her personality and the way she presents herself, she's very tall, very intelligent. And she said, people look to me immediately. And she said, I've found ways to say, I'm not going to lead this training. I'm not going to lead this team. I'm part of the team, but you're the experts. You've been doing this for 10 years. I need to learn from you to win, to succeed for me and for us. It's a skill that she's working on.
And that, back to the book and back to me, but and Peter, but the tag end of our way of thinking about practice is that by determining what was required of them in the particular context where that practice landed them in a moment in time, the problem solving that went along with that brought about the learning and growth.
Right.
That was the ultimate reward in practicing. Right. So while I was teasing a little earlier about why a book, how you're going to make $1 million, the growth and the learning, as you well said, mattered to you. For her, even though she's already probably got a bunch of trophies all over the place, when she talks to you about how she is with others, she seeks others from whom she can learn.
Right.
And so someone who's at the top of literally at the top of whatever game they're in, to find them that they're also wanting to learn from others and in the sense teaching to learn as well is remarkable. Did you see that in any of the others of your 11, or was that particularly a standout for her?
There was another woman who also defined herself as an extrovert, a very strong leader. This woman she was in the Peace Corps in Jordan for several years. She's a Fulbright scholar. She has a doctorate, and she's currently leading an education program in Dubai, and an American. And she actually was always athletic, but really started to compete in her mid-30s, finding a love of endurance sports. And what she loved about endurance is the team aspect. she would do it to challenge herself, the mental aspect of going out there and running. She does marathons and she lifts, but she really is, so she's had to kind of play the catch-up game in a sense of how do you train for these kind of races? How do you incorporate lifting? As she gets older, lifting is really important for women as they age in order to keep that muscle strength and density. And she has really kind of taken from a lot of different coaches from a lot of different countries because she's lived and worked in 3 continents in the past decade. So she has incorporated a lot of cultural aspects as well of how to, you move to a new place, you move to, Dubai, and culturally, what does it look like for a Western woman? And how do I continue to do the things that I do and find people who are willing to mentor and work with me so that I can succeed? So she also spoke of looking around the room and saying, well, who has the knowledge that is going to help me and help the team, and how do I empower them?
There you go. And I love the last point of that. Who has the knowledge and how do I empower them? That is cool, because what you're saying is she may find someone who in that moment thinks of herself or himself as, I'm just an ordinary person in the room. Mm-hmm. But she can sense that there's something that she can learn. And the empowerment is having a successful person come to you and say, could you help me understand? Or mm-hmm. could you show me, or could you watch me and give me some feedback? I know that would be not only flattering to a person, but it would ignite something in them.
Yes.
So we talk about empowerment, but I think it's a moment-to-moment thing too. It's not an overall social condition. I think it happens when people give power to another. In this case, by showing them deference and mm-hmm. respect. Mm-hmm. And actually some excitement when they learn something. And I'm projecting from my experience in figuring out how to live with technology. For years I had a university wrapped around me, and anything I needed, I pick up the phone. Back then we had phones on wires, and I'd call tech support and I'd say, can you come in here? I can't figure this out. And 5 minutes later, I'd have a wonderfully patient student standing next to me saying, no, you keep hitting this. So, and I appreciate it, because no matter what my status was, I was a rank beginner when it came to some of the things. Now, why would I care to have that support? Because I was always trying something new with whatever technology was at hand to enhance and enrich my learner's experience, thereby mine. And so it became part of my reputation. Mm-hmm. What's Dave trying now? Or they used to call me, what's Doc trying now? Mm-hmm. And so I'm empathizing and feeling very good about the characters of your book and your character as an investigator. Let's bring it back to you as you're garnering these stories. Mm-hmm. What impact did that have on you as a person, as a note taker, and ultimately as a writer?
Mm-hmm. I think, those 2 women kind of went together in terms of their personalities, but obviously the other 9 women, expressed a range of personalities and traits and things. So I found myself often trying to situate myself amongst the 11 women. You speak with one, you're inspired, you think about what you might do in the situations that they shared, the particular examples that they wanted to use to show growth or show learning. And so I was trying to find people that who was I compatible with? How could I learn from their stories? How might I view this particular woman in my workplace? And so that was a way for me to kind of, being that I didn't work with any of the women, how they might be perceived in their workplace. How might I view them as another woman? Because I think that's important. A lot of the women spoke about gender equity in their workplaces and how they feel they're perceived and how they perceive other women, and how some of them have, been working in some pretty male-dominated fields, like the social worker in a prison, another one, a corporate lawyer in Chicago, and how they have kind of worked through and found ways to be successful. And so that was where I found myself, is trying to, being a writer and a thinker myself, just like how what would it look like? What do they look like in there after they share their story? So I spent a lot of time just kind of daydreaming and letting those stories kind of take hold.
And coming back to you, as you're making these comparisons, as you're being inspired, or however your emotions are working, my point to you is that you are growing. You are Kathleen. You're Kathleen on the grow. You're discovering things that are different than them, that you have, but perhaps are complementary. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm projecting because I've had a wonderful 3 years of constant growth, because I've taken on this cause of identifying the nature of practice, and with the pandemic that we've all gone through. Thank God that you and I have had something that we could do with our hearts and minds, while we're waiting for all this stuff to subside.
Yeah.
So given that you've grown so much, what's next for you?
Yes. Well, I just finished. I left my full-time teaching position a couple of years ago. I was a high school history teacher for 15 years. Mm-hmm. And the past couple of years, I've been teaching part-time as just a reading tutor in elementary and middle school. So I just finished that. And every year I joke, well, this is my last year teaching, but I don't think I will ever let that go because I enjoy it too much. And last year I finished coaching high school softball. I coached track and field. I coached basketball, field hockey as well. And every year I say, I'm going to, take a break because it's exhausting, coaching is more exhausting.
7 days a week. Yeah.
Oh man. But then some friends connect with me, some high school teammates, and said, we're coaching this middle school softball team. And they're teammates of mine from high school. And they said, we were infielders. We get a group of outfielders. We have no idea what to do with them. And I'm a 5'10" lefty. So I cover ground. So I play the outfield. And so we have a game tonight in New Hampshire. I'm excited about it. So I still get to do that piece. And I've realized how much I want to continue with the coaching no matter what I do. But professionally, Dave, what I'm going to work on is I'm created an LLC business. And I want to, working this summer to finalize keynote talks to work with organizations, whether in education or in areas where women are growing exponentially in technology and manufacturing and finance, to talk about ways they can use their unique voices. So I'll be using my research from my dissertation and from the wonderful stories I got to share in my book, and to create my own business. So that's what I'm working on next, is how to do that.
Oh, you got a lot of learning ahead.
Yes, I do.
And I'm absolutely right. I have a gut feeling for when I'm hearing someone express something they want to step out and do, and in terms of timing, back to context again. And I don't think there could be a better time for you to find receptivity from the standpoint of those, for example, who are trying to restaff a company.
Yeah. And
they realize now that they've taken a whole lot for granted about what they used to call the human resource, which but I suggested they think of them as fellow humans and people, and who have something that they absolutely need to make the business happen. And they can no longer take for granted that all you need to do is turn it all over to someone who writes the paycheck, that there's so much more. And so that piece, that the humility, which Tom talked about in 2 of our podcasts, Tom Casey, where he said, boy, they're really discovering now that this new generation, in particular, the ones that you're working with, the ones that were under 40 and upcoming, and who are, because of Title IX and other good things, a lot more into athletics than a whole bunch of generations preceding. So you get women athletes, women who are developing voice, women who are proved over and over again in the workplace that they can outperform whatever the task may be, whether it be nursing lawyering because of that drive that you have to show us stodgy old men that they got something to offer, and we're the reason that they have to push so hard. I guess that's a service, right? To be knuckleheads as employers, but it's coming. Yeah. And then you got all this media now. Back when I was doing a bit of that, supplement my ego and my income when I was professoring, I found it very hard to get anyone to recognize that I had something to offer, a talk or a workshop or whatever. We had very limited so-called marketing opportunities, and it was mostly word of mouth and quite local. Now, I mentioned Lizzie Freudman to you before we started recording. Mm-hmm. There she is in New Orleans, working with Tom Casey, who's the uncle of your friend, to amplify the voice that they have for their company, their consulting firm. And then she also linked me up with an author named Meredith. Where did I put Meredith's book? I got to use this right here. Anyway, it's called Teaching People. Her mission is to teach people women in particular, how to brag. Oh. How to be self-promoters.
Okay.
And the recording I'll be having with Meredith is coming soon, but Lizzie felt, as a businesswoman with a B Corp, actually, that she needed to become more confident in getting getting people to listen and try her wares. Mm-hmm. She also linked me up with a woman whose episode was about 3 episodes ago, who is supporting B Corps in North Carolina. And she had a wonderful story. So here we are wrapping up on our time here, but also looking back at this nesting of people who are very interested in the business side of getting yourself out there and offering a thought as a service, whether the thought's a talk or however you portray it. Mm-hmm. Your timing is good.
Mm-hmm. I hope so. One of the things I find myself doing, even just with, after all these experiences of working with high school kids, I was an adjunct for a while, and writing this book, is it's such a pleasure to be able to talk individually with young women and even just young girls about ways that they can empower themselves. And one of the things that I've been sharing often with lately is, I find, especially with female athletes, and I think just in general, girls and women in general, is they're very hard on themselves. They don't want to let themselves down. I often say, you don't need to tell them what they did wrong. They probably already know. They're just, so inside their own heads, so many of them, and no matter what their personality is. And so one of the things I've been working on with the young girls on my 12 and under softball team is just, how do you empower your team? And it's a way for you to keep pushing the team forward, even when you're not performing well. I think it's a really important message. And it does help them. They'll come in and they've had 3, ground outs, strikeouts, whatever, and they're so upset with themselves. They want the team to win. They want to get hits. They want to get on base. They want to do well. They personally want to be successful and win. Yeah. And I'm like, hey, you know what? Today isn't your day at bat. And it's okay, but you can cheer on their other teammates. That's one way that you can still contribute, and we can still win even with your strikeouts, so get out of your head, get back to the team. And I think I wish I'd had that lesson when I was a kid, because I put so much on myself, to do everything and be successful. And I wish someone had said, hey, you know what? Of course I was aware there was a team and I wanted the team to win ultimately, but sometimes you're like, I'm not doing anything. But there are lots of ways, I guess I should say.
There are. And I think that we talked a little bit about the drive to win and how that's differentiated most of your interviewees. But there's also learning to lose. And and understanding the value of loss, which you start out with the kids under 12. And there's this notion of the yin and the yang. And if they resist loss so much that they'll quit rather than lose, then that's awful. And so what you and I, as practitioners of writing, thinking, teaching, understand personally is that not every day is a, red letter day. And what you write in your notebook on a particular day is, this day sucked.
Yeah.
Nothing worked. When Zoom crashed and, my cat was crying in the middle of, so whatever it may be, the resilience, the bouncing back, the enthusiasm for life is crucial. And I pick it up on you now. Hopefully you'll know that I think of you as a friend, an instant friend. I truly admire your spirit and what you're accomplishing. And I'm excited that you're going to be moving from the book through perhaps other ways and with your new LLC. What are you calling it?
It's just my name right now, Kathleen Ralls, LLC. So I'll be kind of branching out into books, curriculum, and public speaking.
Great. We'll be watching for that. And in the meantime, I've made you famous just by making you episode 166.
Thank you, Dave. Today's the day.
It is the day. It all's coming together now, Kathleen. But thank you again. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dave. And anything I can do to help you out on your journey, I'm here for you as a friend.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Practice Podcast, where we discuss practice with a capital P. If you'd like to hear more, listen in on Spotify, Automatic, and Apple Podcasts, or go to inactionresearch.com/podcast-page. And if you'd like to learn more about social inaction and the nature of practice, head over to inactionresearch.com for more information. Thank you for supporting this show. We look forward to hearing from you soon.